topic, I called up Andrew Leonards, who I had observed doing something called game storming. A local co-working space had a lot of problems before launch, and they wanted to crowdsource their problem solving. And so they called Andrew in, who was, he was as expert as they came at that point on something called game storming, which is brainstorming that is infused with game theory ideas, and it's something that comes out of the software industry. At this cafe in Tucson, we were having a big issue downtown where we're building a streetcar line, and small businesses, especially, there were a lot of mom and pops. We have a wonderfully funky 4th Avenue downtown area, if you're familiar with it. And Tucsonans were really worried about keeping the flavor of downtown, and the construction was a tremendous stress on that. There were fences all over, streets blocked off for months and months and months. And so our problem that we were brainstorming on as a group at this cafe was ways that businesses could, things that they could do to stay afloat during construction. And so after the cafe, I typed up all the ideas, put it out, sent it to friends who were in business downtown. And that was sort of my idea of how the cafe could be a catalyst in the community for ideas and change. So the recipe that I've developed over time is that it's not a lecture. I don't allow PowerPoints, but I do send my speakers questions a week in advance so we get an idea of where this thing might go. I do try to have people sitting in a circle, no hierarchy. I found that anything I can do to break down a kind of sense of power or hierarchy in the room aids conversation. And also trusting the audience. And by that, having them introduce themselves if it's a smallish group. And if I can't do that, at least asking them, telling them, don't sit on your questions. We really want you to participate. In my networking, in calling people up, in talking to them about what the library is doing, at the cafes, having library staff stand up and talk about what their jobs are. We've been able to let Tucson's tech community and business community know how interested the library is in what they're doing. To the point where when the startups and co-working spaces and maker spaces and hacker spaces downtown wanted to form a coalition, they asked the library to be a charter member of the Downtown Innovation District. Our local co-working space, it's just across the street, it used to be called Gangplank and now is CoLab, has a really interesting model. They don't charge for the co-working. It's entirely free. Anyone can come in and work. What you're expected to give back instead of money is your social capital, which seems to me to be a very library-ish thing. I really love the model. They are working on ways of getting their rent free. That's their biggest expense. And they already get their broadband and all of that for free. So there's this wonderful co-working space across the street from Main Library, and I've been visiting it frequently. And they just invited me to observe some of their startup workshops. This is a quote from the man who created, Eric Ries created Lean Startup. And the idea is that instead of working on something in silence and quietly without talking to your potential customers and users, that you do a lean startup where you very rapidly communicate and interview people who would be your users and purchasers, and pivot and work through iterations. You're going to be rapidly changing your product so that it fits more with what your users actually need. So the idea is that you don't have to have as much to actually start something new as you would with a more traditional business plan.